Cool, we're live. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian. I interview people for a living sometimes. And so we're going to chat with Pieter and Tom and see what's going on in the world of design tools and what we can expect and hopefully how we can make all of our lives easier as designers. Let's just take a couple minutes, introduce yourself however you want the world to know you, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so my name is Pieter Omvlee. I'm the founder of Sketch, which started out many years ago as a small design tool that nobody was really using. And then starting in 2011, we released version 2 of Sketch, and that is when suddenly more and more people started using Sketch. And we've been at it ever since, and we have many exciting plans for the future.
And I'm Tom Giannattasio. I'm a product designer. I started off working in the agency life, consulting on products for companies like Apple and Oracle. I eventually went to Twitter by way of acqui-hire, went to MIT for a while and helped them start edX, which is a massive online courseware. I left MIT to found my own company called Macaw, which was a responsive web design tool. And we were just acquired by InVision about 6 months ago. So now I'm at InVision, and I'm helping build product there.
Cool. So it's obviously WWDC that brings us together. So just quickly, I'm wondering if there's anything you've seen this week that you're excited about for your own products that we can be expecting in the near future.
Okay. Well, the big thing on the Mac that Apple introduced this year has been tabs. And this is a feature request we've had for many years. Like, can you please add tabs to Sketch? And now we will be able to do that with apparently very little extra work. So that has me quite excited.
Tabs for each Sketch document.
Yeah, indeed.
Cool. Finally.
I'm going to cop out of an answer here and say that I'm excited for tabs to show up in sketches.
Tabs, right? I think what's so interesting about design tools and the ecosystem today is nobody really expected how big it would be. Whether it's product design or illustrators or icon designers, certainly Sketch and certainly other companies in the space had no idea how many of us there were that needed access to these tools. So as a result, we're seeing prototyping tools on and on. What I'm interested in, though, is how you think of new technologies and new forms of design that are coming up, and if there's markets that we should start thinking about and addressing, whether it's by way of your own tool or something new. So for example, virtual reality, artificial intelligence tools. Are these things that you are thinking about, and how we can start building tools for that next wave of designers?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Virtual reality specifically has me very excited. I get giddy about it, I think, and I drive my wife crazy talking about, oh my God, you should see this stuff going on, oh my God. But we did a hack week actually in InVision about a week ago, and we were like, what if you did prototyping in virtual reality, right? And so we built this quick little environment to design while you're inside of virtual reality, which is pretty cool. And I've seen other people who have pulled up IDEs inside of your headset and building up a world around you. That's unbelievable in my mind. And there's probably a ton of opportunities that the technology is not quite there yet, right? But there's something there for sure in my eyes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's being a designer or a developer in these days. There's so much happening, and many of those things are very interesting, and we get tons of questions from people like if we will be going into certain directions, even like virtual reality. And while it's all very exciting, it's also for us it's also a big consideration. Like we don't want to make the tool too complex. You don't want to keep adding everything into Sketch and have it evolve into some kind of monster. At the same time, I always see like designers very eager to jump onto the next big thing, which I completely understand. But at the same time, I also think there are so many things like in the apps, the apps and the machines we use now that could still be improved so much more. We don't need to always be looking to the next thing, because there's so much stuff like in basic usability in the devices that we use every day that can still be improved.
I think that's really interesting. Do you have a long-term vision for Sketch, or are you too focused on solving the problems we have right now?
No, we definitely have a long-term vision for sketching. We know things that we want to do, and we just haven't had time to do them yet. But we also clearly know there are certain parts of the design world that we just don't want to go, because we want the app to stay focused.
I know you have to be slightly opaque, but could you share a little bit about what the long-term vision is, even if it's just in the sense of how we build things that help designers solve problems? Like where's Sketch skating in it? Mm-hmm. Not specific features necessarily, but the way you build products.
Right. Well, just to name one feature that, well, a few years ago, many people were asking us, like, can you please add better printing support to Sketch? It's like, because I like Sketch, but I know I use something like InVision. Can you please add those kind of things to Sketch? And we've always been, no, we are about designing stuff for digital media. We don't want to add all of that other stuff that our core audience wouldn't use. And I think that is still very much our vision. We want to help digital design, but we also don't want to do everything. Like we want this ecosystem around Sketch to pick up many of the other parts of the digital design flow,
right.
like prototyping, for example. It's great that there are so many tools out there that combined can do so many more things that compared to what we could do if we wanted to keep it all in-house.
And Tom, I was challenged to ask this because it's just silly. What's the vision for InVision?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the vision for InVision is really to sort of own the design process, right? We want to help people across the entire spectrum of creating a product, right? So from creation to actual deployment, right? We started as this prototyping tool, and we were pretty early on with prototyping tools, and it was a very fast way to add interaction to things, right? Yeah. It was like designed for a long time. It was just like two-dimensional. You were dealing with your X and Y, and there was no way to really communicate across these other dimensions, like time and interaction, right? Yeah. And that's a core piece. But from there, we kind of realized like we can help people a lot more if we start expanding in other directions, right? So, and one of the key pieces that I think that we found was that collaboration is kind of at the heart of design, right? So it's not just a designer who sits in a room and creates something magical, right? It's a lot of different people all coming together that actually gets a product made.
Yeah, I think we should dig into that because certainly for myself, I've spent so much time thinking about bridging the gap between design and development, like the thing that's being shipped and what we represent in pixels. But there's obviously so much more that goes into that, things like research and content strategy, usability testing, on and on and on. So maybe we can talk specifically like about research and talking to real people in the real world. I'm wondering if if there is a vision for your products to be less about the pixels and the code and more about like the other disciplines that feed into a successful design.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so collaboration is one of the biggest things that we think about, right? And that manifests itself in many different ways, right? So there's the obvious kind of things that we have, like being able to comment all in one place, right? That helps, right? But we're also looking at things, you've got to do user testing, right? Mm-hmm. So we're working on features that help that. We do have things that help try to bridge that gap over to development as well, because those guys are all part of the equation. I think, just to be honest, at InVision we're a little lacking in the earlier side, right? Because we rely on other tools like Sketch to kind of help bridge that gap, right? And bring all of that design work into our platform to help people communicate back and forth. But there's a ton of things that need to be done there, right? We're realizing like what we have now is really great for the designer, but then they have to share it with a ton of other people, right? Design is like 80% selling, right? It's not just I put these pixels on the page, right? I got to be able to sell this to people, and how do you do that effectively, So motion is one of the things that I'm currently focused on, right? Like adding animation into prototyping, and I was on a call with Val Head, who's like superstar animator, and one of the things that she said to us was like, if you really want to sell animation to people, like you have to have slow motion, right? And that kind of stuck with me. And it's like those little pieces that we can add to help you do the other parts of your job. It's not just like the final product. It's like part of that process to actually sell design to other people is super critical. Otherwise, what you created will never see the light of day.
Okay. And
Yeah.
for you?
Well, what we noticed early on with Sketch is that apparently we made a tool that was easy enough also for non-designers to get into. It's like we've heard from many independent developers who always used to rely on others for making the few little icons that they needed, and now they were able to make those in Sketch themselves, or like agencies where designers used to redline assets and then send them off to the developers. They would export every little asset out so that the developer wouldn't have to know how the design team worked. And now we hear very often like the designers and the developers, they use both, they use the same Sketch files, and the developers know how to export assets out of Sketch in exactly the way they want. And I think that solves a lot of going back and forth between designers and developers, where a designer exports something one way and then the developer comes back and says, well, no, actually I need it to be in a box of those kind of things.
If I could abstract that out, you've deliberately chosen to focus on that particular relationship and not necessarily a relationship between like content strategy and design. Is that right?
Yeah, I think for us it has been a very deliberate attempt to keep the app simple enough that also people like developers who don't live in such an app every day can also use it.
Could you both speak a little more to that? Because I think what's happening now, certainly with InVision Labs and Craft, bringing prototyping directly into Sketch, and then on the other side, like putting drawing tools into something like InVision, perhaps. I think there's an interesting direction that you could go in terms of how focused do you want to be, or do you want to try and solve every problem? Do you outsource those problems to developers by way of plugins and things like that?
Yeah, I think for us the vision has been that like as I said, we don't want to do everything, and I would rather enable an entire ecosystem of apps and services around us to help with that. Like whatever, for example, whatever kind of prototyping tool we could build into Sketch, it would pale in comparison to the entire scala of prototyping tools that are out there. So we would rather help them make their stuff better, a way of a better integration with Sketch than to try to do everything.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge. I think especially when you look at design and prototyping, for a long time we've kind of split those off, but it's the same thing, right? Prototyping and designing and interaction is part of the design process. And in my eyes, like having those paired is a super powerful workflow, right? It enables a super powerful workflow. And I think they've been segmented for a very long time. And even our friends in the corner here are like working on bridging that gap, right? Because I think that's a gap that can easily be bridged. And I think it actually belongs in one tool. I don't think one takes away from the other. I think they actually kind of work well together.
But how far does that go? Because then could you just argue, all right, now we're going to export,
right, ship it out,
like,
right?
Yeah, what's the line where you say we become unfocused and we're doing a lot of things not as well?
Absolutely. So I think it's a little bit like, you're providing a solid experience for a designer that they can like execute on a vision.
Sure.
Right now, I think it's fairly clear that like there's a wall in between, right, in the designer's process. It's inside of that where they've got this thing and they're like, well, I want to add some interactions. I want to like design how this flows. Now I've got to take it over to some other tool. Like those walls that we have up is basically, I think, from a lack of solid tooling. But there's still going to be like, quite honestly, there's some people probably do want to just ship from a design tool. I don't know that that's a great thing, but it's not a final product, right? Like the bridge from taking what you've designed into development is always going to be fairly significant, right? This was a problem that I dove into deep with McCall, and it was like, oh, we think we can kind of solve this gap. You don't necessarily solve that gap. That is a really tough one to solve because there's a lot more that goes into development that if you were to try to support that in a GUI fashion, like it would be a fucking nightmare.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you do believe that there is room for a tool that can go from start to finish and do it well? Or
I won't say from start to finish, no, but I do think that prototyping, being considered part of the design process, is something that's kind of important. And those tools, I think there is an opportunity to kind of merge those a bit.
I would say yes and no. I mean, I don't think they have to be part of the same tool, but I do think that design and prototyping are so closely linked together that there should without a doubt be a seamless flow from one to the other and back, and like I think not everything has to be in the same app.
okay, but you have allowed anyone to put anything inside of Sketch.
Yeah,
By way of plugins.
indeed.
How does that change the way you build Sketch? Because now you have dependencies and like toolbars all over that.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, it's your app, right? It's Sketch, and you should be able to solve the problems you want to solve. But now you have other people solving very real problems by way of their own UI.
Yeah, and that is great, and at the same time, it's a bit scary. And like what InVision did with Craft, I think those tools are a great addition to Sketch, but I would be wary if there are 5 or 6 more tools that all add their little strip of UI into Sketch. And then it's like, wait a minute, this is our app, and we want to do some of those features as well. And you do actually need enough space on the canvas left to do things. So I think the way we've been going at it is, well, at first we added the scriptability to Sketch just at first because it was the easiest thing we could do. We could expose a few APIs and other designers or developers could write scripts fairly easily without using the JavaScript bridge. But then you get really savvy developers reverse engineering the binary and then discovering how they can insert their own UI elements into our app. And then you think like, well,
Oh God.
so yeah, it's great and it's not so great, and it does make it more difficult for us to change things. Because like, for example, the proof prototyping in Craft actually inserts elements into the layer list in Sketch. So we can't just go rewrite that entire thing without telling InVision like, hey guys, you might want to change a few things. But I think on the whole, it has been a gigantic plus for Sketch. I would be happy taking the few downsides that it has in exchange for all the good. If that is an answer.
It is. Within your teams, I think we find two very different directions. Obviously, you're new at InVision, so I guess speak to what you know and what you can. But Pieter, you've been building Sketch for 10 years?
Something like that, yeah.
And the team is 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
InVision's been around a little while, order of magnitude larger.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, from a process perspective and from the perspective of how are we solving problems for other designers, like how is that going? Being so small and also having this massive team trying to ship so much stuff. How's that going? What are the challenges?
It's definitely interesting. And you know, when I was at McCall, right, we were 3 people. And we thought we had this fairly good process, and then we went over to InVision. We're almost 200 people, right?
Crazy.
It was like a shock, like, oh my God, it's so big, right? And it was different, right? We still, I think what we have to do is we try to cut up our team as much as possible to pretend that we're small, right? We have to pretend that we're in these tight, small teams to get anything done. Otherwise, there's just too many people, too many voices. And you know, we've got a fairly small, tightly knit design team that's pushing out innovations. And I think that the difference is that we just have the resources to execute on a number of different things in parallel. But we still try to maintain a very tight, small team size, right? Like our engineering teams are broken up to a max of 6 or 7 engineers usually. And they're siloed off for the most part, right, on their product. They're focused completely on that. We have a product manager that's in charge of that product, and they work together as if we're the Sketch team, right? But there's also a lot of complications, for sure, in a big company. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of competing initiatives that sometimes it's hard to wrangle in, but
The answer is to go small.
The answer is to pretend you're as small as you can pretend, I guess.
What's it like when you're not pretending to be small?
I like it. When I started Sketch, we never had the ambition to grow to a big company or anything like that. The ambition was to make the best tool that we could, and over time you find out, well, actually we need someone to help us out with support, QA, more engineers. But we've only ever hired more people when we really saw a need. Like we really can't do it anymore with the small team that we have. We need help, and because we are a privately owned company with no funding, especially at the beginning, we were not in the position to just hire 10 engineers and say, come help us out, we really need you. Like, we grew slowly, bit by bit, and I think that has helped us. I mean, it takes time to get engineers and the designers on board, and if you can do it bit by bit, I think you can keep the team small, focused, and still effective.
So at InVision, they have the freedom and resources to do parallel. At Sketch, is it always one feature at a time, or have you paralleled multiple projects?
No, we're definitely working on multiple features at the same time. But I think with a small, I think it's normal with a small focused company. We can't do too many things at the same time, but we are working on more than one thing, and I think the pace with which we are evolving is really healthy.
Cool. We have 4 minutes left, and I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but it'd be cool to take audience questions. But I have one more question for the both of you, and then if there's time, maybe like one.
Do that.
Cool, sweet, we can do it. One question I like to ask, and you can go with this how you will. What keeps you up at night? What's on your mind?
Right. Shall I go first then?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. yeah, the thing that, to say the thing that keeps me up at night is like what we've said at the beginning of our conversation, that the design world is evolving very, 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 very fast. And I'm personally scared of falling behind. Sort of, that like for example, I'm not active on Facebook. I don't use Snapchat. I think emojis are silly. And no,
whoa, come on.
yeah. So, like as things keep evolving, yeah, I would be scared to no longer understand the needs of the designers, developers,
So
our audience.
that keeps you up at night, but then when you wake up, how do you combat that?
I try to fight it, but it's hard.
Yeah.
In short, I would say I'm scared of turning into a grumpy old guy. It's like, these young people.
That is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, indeed.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to yours in the sense that I see a lot of opportunity in what we're doing right now, and design is growing as a discipline, and you know, it's like I feel like I'm getting old in a way too, but it's kind of like FOMO, you know, like there's so many awesome things that I want to get involved with that will I even be able to do them before I die? You know, I'm not so sure. Don't eat very healthy, you know.
Is that paralyzing or inspiring?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think it manifests in a couple different ways, you know. So when I was running my own company, it was like, oh my God, we've got this opportunity, and I had built it up in my head, like, oh my God, we can do all these things. Everybody's telling you, like, oh my God, you're gonna make this money, you're gonna do these things, and you're like, holy shit, I gotta do these things. And it keeps you up at night because you're like, you fuck something up, or you just, you know, like, oh my God, it's the most stressful, you know, situation that I think I've ever been in my life. But you know, it is also inspiring. There's definitely times I think as a designer, as a creative person, you wake up and you're like, oh man, I gotta like execute on this. I gotta like wake up. You know, this morning I'm up at 4:30. Part of that's jet lag, but part of it's also just like
Mostly jet lag.
you know, I gotta get to work, man.
Yeah.
There's stuff to do.
Cool.
Yeah.
By my count, we have 54 seconds. I don't know if we're allowed to go over, but if anyone has like a 14 to 15 second question.
You're the closest one.
Yeah, seriously, clock's ticking.
Hi, about Sketch. Do the recent changes that Apple has made to the App Store make it any more likely to produce a version for the iPad? And if not, what else does Apple need to do?
Oh God, did we have? I'm sorry, but
Can we-
Be like the Jeopardy music.
Wait, it's just snacks after this, right?
Just snacks.
Whoa. sorry.
Yeah. Now the thing is, like, we don't have Sketch for the iPad for a large number of reasons. I mean, personally, as a consumer, I really like the iPad, but I find, but I think they're both on the business side and on the and just the integration with the rest of the platform, there would be issues. Like the fact that there are subscriptions now, that really helps on the business side. But I think also the nature of Sketch, like you want very pixel precise editing, that kind of stuff is more difficult to do on an iPad. But I also think, look, the fact that Sketch is not a silo. You bring sources in from elsewhere, and then you export assets out, and you need to put those assets somewhere. Or you're like Sketch, like you have Sketch, and then you want to use Craft or a Framer to turn those assets into something else, and then do something with it. And everything on the iPad is so closed down that I fear it would not be a very that it would not make for a Sketch that I would personally be happy to ship.
We have received permission for One more question.
One more, and whoever's the closest person to me gets that question. Anybody? Oh, you're all the way over there. Oh, man.
Nobody.
God. Chose
You
wrong.
lost your chance, that half of the room.
Where, you. All right.
Yeah, is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm just wondering, in a big picture sense, what are some ways that your products are falling short of what you would want them to be or what you think they could be? Not to ask you to like disparage yourselves or to specifically cite, oh, we have a new feature coming, in the next beta, but recognizing that software is, always a process of realizing a vision.
Yeah. So I think at InVision, one of the biggest things is we're a sort of low fidelity prototyping tool. And over the past few years, there's been a real call for higher fidelity in prototyping. And it's something that, as it stands, it's a little hard for us to support, right? Because we are, essentially dealing with one flat image, and how high fidelity can one flat image become? But that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to address actually right now. And it's a complex problem. It's much different from this rapid prototyping workflow, and it's something that we're working pretty hard to try to solve.
As for us, I would say, like when you are a designer working at a medium to large company, it's likely that the company has a sort of design language going on, and there are certain standardized components that they want everybody to use, and all the designers should use the same elements, and those elements should be very flexible, and all those kind of things. Like with our recent release with the new symbols, I think we've taken a good step towards making those kind of design systems more feasible. But I think we have a long way to go there. We can make the collaboration between teams, and making those components really flexible. We can do better there.
Cool. I think we're out of time. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks.